Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be replacing the transmission mount on a 2015 Nissan Rogue. You're going to find it on the driver's side underneath the battery. We're going to be replacing the mount due to a very serious vibration you feel in the cabin. If you're in drive or reverse, just sitting at a light, you start to feel pretty much everything inside the cabin shaking really bad. We narrowed it down to the transmission mount that's causing the vibration and the rattle. First thing we're going to do is remove the battery and the air intake snorkel here. Remove the negative terminal first and then the positive. This is very important. Don't do it the other way around. Next, we're going to loosen the 10 millimeters for the hold down on the battery. When you're removing this little rod right here, you're going to want to turn it to the side to unhook it from the anchor down underneath. I'll show you how it looks later on when we remove the snorkel, but basically this little anchor hooks into a bracket. So when you loosen the nut, you want to push the anchor back and twist, and then that'll free it up. Now this will free up and we can just release this. This anchor is the same thing, it's just you just twist and pull to get it to come off. And now we can remove the battery. We have a 10 millimeters screw right here. You can also use the Phillips. Remove this and this will release the intake tube right here. Next, we have the electrical connections on the control modules to remove. You have 3 on this one over here, and then some 10 millimeters to remove the tray. The locking tab on this, you have to push in on this piece right here. And once you push this in, you can flip over the locking tab. These over here are the same style. So you push in on the center and flip over the locking tab. This middle connector seems to be kind of hard to remove, and I'm assuming the bottom one's going to be even harder, so we're going to remove it once we get the bracket a little higher up. I'll show you what that's going to look like. So underneath this little battery tray, this comes right off. You're going to find 4 10 millimeter screws. You have one here, 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 and right here. We're going to take those off. Now we need to slide the whole bracket on over. You need to get this wire harness over this little hump right here, and then you can start to lift up. Once it's kind of free and you're lifting up, come back to the harness over here. You're gonna find that this connector here will be a little easier to remove now. And then you can lift up even more once you get that connector off. Just move to the side and I'll give you easier access to this one. This is easier than trying to remove this connector while it's really down deep in there. And now we can remove the whole tray on out. Now we're going to remove this air box. You have the 10 millimeter here, one connector for the mass airflow sensor, and a band clamp down in there. That's a flathead. Pinch the connector here to unclip. And remember to pull the connector housing. Really refrain from pulling the wires. So when it's in the connector, when you pinch the clip here to unlock it, don't pull the wire from here. You need to grab the connector itself, otherwise you risk pulling out the wires. Undo the band clamp for the intake tube. I'm using a flathead. And then you need to detach this connector from the housing. The hose here kind of gets caught in between this area, so just be careful with this brake fluid reservoir. You can move it a little bit, just be gentle with it. Don't put too much stress on it. Now this is the whole transmission mount. It's this bracket with the mount here that extends over here, and this screw right here. We're going to need to remove this and reattach it to the new transmission mount. Now this harness right here, we need to move it this way a little bit because we need to take off this 13, and the other 13 is right underneath it, so we need to pull it back while we undo that screw. Now that allows us to detach from the trans mount bracket here, and now we can work on the bolts for the transmission mount. You have 11 bolts total for the transmission mount. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 under here, 7. You have 8 and 9 right there. Number 10 is here, and number 11 is directly underneath this mount, hidden under there. You can barely see it right there. So I have the car lifted on jack stands. You don't need to do that. What you need to do is get a floor jack with a piece of wood, slide it under here, and put it under the transmission to support it. So when we remove the bolts, it doesn't fall down. So I have the floor jack here with the piece of wood up under the transmission, and I have it supported right now. So now I can go back up top and loosen up the bolts. There's one bolt right underneath this shifter cable that's really awkward to get to. What you need to do is remove the nut for the shifter cable. Once it's loose, hold the bottom with your finger, hold it up like this, loosen the nut all the way, and you're going to guide this down, put the nut back on, and that'll give you the space you need to get to that bolt. So we're going to start by loosening up the 4 right here. I'm going to choose this one here to release the last. I'm just going to loosen it, but it's still going to stay attached, and I'll explain why. Okay, so here's what's going to happen. When you loosen all 4 of these bolts, the weight of the transmission is going to fall down. This is what's holding on the transmission to the mount, and then the mount is mounted to the body. So when you remove the 4th bolt, that's when the transmission is going to want to fall. So let's remove this one, and that one first, and then we'll continue. So the transmission moved just a little bit right there, but I don't think it's going to move anymore after this. See, these bolts are really easy to come off. This one has some tension to it. Okay, oh, this bolt's different. This is the only bolt that's going to be different. So make sure this one goes back in this hole. Okay, so at this point, that bolt is the only thing that's holding up the transmission. So I want you to notice this is going to impact more than the other ones. See, and the transmission is starting to lower. You don't want that. What's happening basically is the jack underneath isn't putting enough support. So we're going to jack it up underneath just so that the transmission's fully supported and it's not being held on by that bolt anymore. Okay, so I jacked it up a little bit right there. See how now I can release the bolt and the transmission is not moving. So the bolt's fully off, and now the full weight of the tranny is being held up by the jack underneath the car. All right, so let's start with one of the harder bolts, which is down underneath the bracket. And as a better visual, this is how it looks in the engine bay. The one we're working on is sitting right here. So this is the one we're going to work on. You can come in with your ratchet, a small like 3-inch extension with the socket. And you can see you can come in and grab the bolt here. Now what we're really doing is just trying to break it loose, because we're not going to be able to ratchet the whole thing out. So little by little I was able to loosen this up, and right there it's loose, so we're going to leave it there. And now we're going to get to the one down there, but we can't do it with this. We need a wrench or a much smaller socket. So the way I access that bolt is I have a long 16mm wrench, and I have it attached over here, and I'm going to be using my leverage from this angle to break it loose. Now you can do it if you have a smaller 16mm wrench. From this spot here, you can reach underneath with your 16mm wrench and break it loose from here. This is really hard. Either way, that bolt sucks to get to. It's not going to be easy, but I'm just showing you how I have it set up so I can loosen it up, and we're going to see how this works out. So I was able to loosen it up from that angle. It wasn't too bad, but I did use my legs to loosen it up. I'll show you what I mean in a little bit. But after you loosen up the bolts, you could just remove them by hand. Just be sure not to drop them. Okay, so now the really difficult bolt, the one that you can't even see here, the one that's under, pretty much right under this mount, I'm gonna get it the same way I got this bolt right here. And then the only ones that are left are the easy ones, right? The 3 on the side over here, and then the 1 bolt back there. Okay, so I have the long wrench, 16. it's on the bolt right now. And how I did it was basically, I positioned myself here, like towards the front of the car. See this right here? Positioned myself pretty much on the floor. And what I was doing was I grabbed it like this, but then with my feet, I'm basically kicking back, and that's what's loosening up the bolt. I'm not really using arm strength to pull this back. I'm putting my legs here and just kicking back. And that's what's giving me the torque I need, because doing this by hand, pulling this back, that's gonna hurt. It's gonna be really hard. So just kick back with it onto the lower control arm if you're using this method. I'll put a link in the description for this type of wrench. It's a combo set. The brand's called Mountain. It's on Amazon, but it's really, really good. I like them. Okay, this one's Matco. That Mountain set's pretty much the same thing, so it's a good set. Okay, now I'm gonna reach in here and take the bolt out by hand the rest of the way. So if you can get the ones we just did, this one's really easy. It's not a big deal. And now the last ones are the easiest ones, which are here, and right there. And these bolts are pretty tight, so I'm switching over to a 1/2 inch to loosen them up. And if you're following along and you made it this far, as far as like working on it, and you got those bolts off, you should be very proud of yourself, because those are not easy. Those were pretty hard to get to. Okay, they're loose now. Now we'll just zip them out with the gun. One, two, and three. So all the bolts are the same, remember, except that one right there. Okay, so now we should be able to maneuver this on out. Shifter cable out of the way. There we go. And we'll slide the new one on in. This part that I got is just a random off-brand part. You can get like a O'Reilly's, AutoZone, Rock Auto. I'll look on Amazon, see if I can find one, and I'll put a link for it, but it's not the original one. Alright, so what we're going to do from here is we're going to start the bolts over here, mostly all of them by hand first, before we tighten anything down. I made a mistake. Not only is this bolt the only one that's different for the ones that go from the mount to the transmission, the other three, they're also different. These are longer. So don't put these on this side, the ones that go to the body. Look. So the shorter ones, those are the ones that you put on the body on this side. The longer ones go from the mount to the transmission, with the exception of the one that's under the shifter linkage. That's the longest one. All the bolts for the tranny lined up perfectly, so we could just easily turn these by hand first. one right here. Okay, so what we're gonna do is basically just feel for it on this side. There we go, found one, the bolt started. Okay, and the other one's like, oh, it's right here. Okay, start this one. Easy to reach this one from up here. Oh, here, I forgot to show you guys how I'm doing this. So I'm just putting my hand in through here and then turning it. I wasn't catching the threads on this one right now, but since nothing's tight on the mount, shake it around just so the threads can catch. Okay, and then the last one here. That's good. Okay, so now we're gonna tighten up the ones that go from the mount to the body, the 3 up here. Come with a 1/2 inch, make it nice and good and tight. Okay. When you're tightening from here, make sure you're not tightening with your fist like this, because if that wrench slips, you're going to punch a very strong metal. So I always go like this whenever I'm tightening in it, and there's a risk of that slipping. I go like this, because if that slips, I don't want my hand going like this. I want it going like that. Okay, that's tight. And now we got to do the other one, the one that's like right here. That. Switching over to the 3/8 ratchet. Now we're tightening up the bolt in this area, not the one that's really far down. We did those already. Here, let me show you. Like this one right here. This is the one we're tightening up. And I'm doing this with a long 3/8 ratchet, a 3-inch extension with a wobble, and a 16mm. Okay, now we're going to drive down the bolts for the transmission. just snug down the bolts. Okay, now we can put the shift linkage back on. Hold the nut. Pay attention to this right here. This is kind of squared, and that's because you want that square to fit in between this hole. Like that. So see right here, it's not all the way in because it's just a little twisted. You gotta twist it just so it fits all the way up. Put the nut on. And this one's not too tight. Just tighten this down a little bit. Snug. Now I'm gonna release the jack underneath so the weight of the transmission shifts over to the mount. And now we can start assembling everything back together. This little bracket, see this part right here? You want to brace that on the back side here, not anywhere else. Just right up against there, like that. Alright guys, so that's the end of the video. If you liked it, if you learned something, or if I helped you save some money, consider subscribing to the channel. Click right here on the top left corner for more videos on the 2015 Nissan Rogue. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.